In the early 1980s, Ireland was broke, unemployment hovered near 20%. Young people were leaving in waves, entire villages were emptying out. If you graduated from college in Dublin, your most realistic career plan was a one-way ticket to London or Boston. The country was drowning in debt, stuck on the edge of Europe, with few natural resources and almost no global influence. Today, that same country reports one of the highest GDP per person numbers on earth, higher than Germany, higher than the UK, at times even higher than the United States. So what happened? Did Ireland suddenly become more productive than everyone else? Did it invent a miracle technology? Or is something else going on beneath the surface? Because the truth is stranger than the headline, and the math is uncomfortable. Right now, Ireland matters more than you think. In a world where countries are desperate for growth, Ireland is held up as the model: low taxes, business-friendly policies, global tech giants setting up shop. A small country outsmarting bigger ones. Politicians point to Ireland and say, "See, cut corporate taxes and prosperity will follow." But Ireland's story is not just about low taxes. It's about timing, leverage, and a system that quietly reshuffled trillions of dollars on paper. To understand it, we need to go back to the crisis years. In the late 1980s, Ireland made a decision. It couldn't compete on size, it couldn't compete on military power, it couldn't compete on domestic market scale. So it chose to compete on tax. The corporate tax rate was slashed to 12.5% at a time when most European countries were charging double that. It wasn't subtle. Ireland was effectively telling multinational corporations, "Book your profits here, we'll treat you well." But low tax alone doesn't build an economy. Plenty of countries have low taxes and remain poor. Ireland added something else. It invested heavily in education, especially science, engineering, and finance. It joined the European Union, giving companies based in Ireland full access to the EU single market. And crucially, it was English-speaking. That combination mattered. If you were an American tech company in the 1990s, Ireland looked perfect. Culturally close to the US, legally inside the EU, politically stable, and offering one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the developed world. Companies started arriving. Intel built semiconductor plants. Pharmaceutical giants set up manufacturing. Later, the tech wave hit. Google, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, all established major European headquarters in Dublin. On paper, it looked like Ireland had become a global innovation powerhouse. But here's where the story gets complicated. Many of these companies weren't just building offices, they were moving profits. Through a maze of legal structures with names that sound like accounting jokes, the double Irish, the Dutch sandwich corporations shifted intellectual property rights into Irish subsidiaries. Imagine a tech company that earns billions selling software in Germany, France, and Italy. Instead of booking that profit where the sales happen, it assigns the ownership of the software to an Irish entity. The other branches then pay Ireland for the right to use it. The money flows to Dublin on paper. And because Ireland's tax rate is low, the overall tax bill shrinks dramatically. This wasn't illegal. It was strategic. Ireland allowed it. Other countries tolerated it for years. And then in 2015, something extraordinary happened. Ireland's GDP grew by 26% in a single year. 26%. Economists were stunned. There was no productivity revolution, no sudden baby boom, no massive discovery of oil. It was accounting. A handful of multinational corporations relocated massive intellectual property assets to Ireland. Billions upon billions in intangible value were suddenly sitting on Irish balance sheets. The country's official output exploded overnight. Paul Krugman called it leprechaun economics. The nickname stuck because here is the uncomfortable truth. Ireland's headline GDP doesn't fully reflect the income of ordinary Irish households. A significant portion of that output belongs to foreign shareholders. When Apple books profit in Ireland, that inflates Irish GDP. But the ultimate owners are global investors. So economists started looking at a different number, modified gross national income, or NII, a measure that strips out some of the multinational distortions. That number is still high. Ireland is genuinely wealthier than it was decades ago. But it's not the C5 level of prosperity the raw GDP suggests. The miracle is real, but it's also engineered, and it came with risks. The first warning sign appeared in 2008. During the global financial crisis, Ireland's banks collapsed. Years of cheap credit had fueled a property bubble. Construction cranes filled the Dublin skyline, home prices soared. When the bubble burst, the government guaranteed the bank's debts. Public finances imploded. At one point, Ireland's budget deficit reached 32% of GDP, one of the highest ever recorded in peacetime Europe. The country had to be bailed out by the European Union and the IMF. It was a brutal reminder that attracting multinational profits doesn't immunize you from domestic financial mistakes. Yet Ireland recovered faster than many expected. Why? Because those multinational companies didn't leave. In fact, they expanded. As Europe tightened regulations and tax scrutiny increased, Ireland adjusted. It phased out some of the more aggressive loopholes, but it kept the core model intact: low taxes, skilled workforce, EU access, and the tech giants kept pouring in. Today, a significant share of Ireland's corporate tax revenue comes from just a handful of firms. That's efficient and terrifying, because it means government finances are heavily dependent on the strategic decisions of a few multinational corporations. If global tax rules change, and they are changing, Ireland feels it immediately. The OECD has pushed for a global minimum corporate tax of 15%. The idea is to reduce profit shifting and tax competition between countries. Ireland initially resisted. Eventually, it agreed. That may sound minor, 12.5 to 15%, but when your entire growth strategy is built around being slightly cheaper than everyone else, small differences matter, and then there's concentration risk. If a few tech or pharmaceutical companies were to restructure, relocate intellectual property, or face regulatory crackdowns, Ireland's tax base could swing dramatically. In some recent years, corporate tax made up more than a quarter of Ireland's total tax revenue. Think about that, a country of 5 million people relying on the profit flows of global giants whose customer base lives somewhere else. It's brilliant and fragile. There's also the housing crisis, as high-paying multinational jobs flooded into Dublin. Demand for housing surged, supply didn't keep up. Rents climbed, home prices soared again. This time, not driven by reckless domestic banks, but by genuine demand colliding with limited construction. For young Irish workers not employed by tech or pharma, the prosperity can feel uneven. Ireland is rich, but not everyone feels rich, and yet zoom out and the transformation is undeniable. In the 1980s, Ireland was exporting its people. Today, it imports talent from across Europe and beyond. Its unemployment rate is low. Its public finances for now are strong. It has positioned itself at the center of global capital flows despite being geographically peripheral. So how did Ireland get so rich? By understanding that in a globalized economy, profits are more mobile than factories. By realizing that intellectual property can be moved with a signature, by betting that being the most attractive home for multinational balance sheets could lift a small nation's fortunes, and it worked, at least so far. But here's the larger question. If Ireland's prosperity depends heavily on the rules of global tax competition, what happens when those rules change? If every country adopts the same minimum tax rate, if profit shifting becomes harder, if digital services are taxed where customers live instead of where intellectual property sits, does Ireland remain a giant? Or does the magic fade? Because the world is slowly closing the loopholes that made Ireland extraordinary. The country has already started building a sovereign wealth-style fund to manage windfall corporate tax revenues, acknowledging that these flows may not last forever. That's a subtle admission. The leaders know this is not a permanent guarantee. Ireland's rise is not a fairy tale. It's a case study in strategic positioning, in exploiting the gaps between legal systems, in turning smallness into an advantage. It shows how modern wealth isn't just about producing more stuff. It's about where profits land, and Ireland convinced a significant share of global profits to land on its shores. The real question isn't how Ireland got rich. It's whether the system that made it rich can survive the next phase of globalization. Because when your economy is built on being the best host for other people's profits, You're always one rule change away from a very different story.